Hello and welcome to this week's Live Local and Loud with me, Kevin Gaughan. On this week's show I shall be chatting to Phil Stiles, who's the frontman of local prog rockers Final Coil. We'll be chatting about how Final Coil are getting on, as well as Phil's solo project. And of course we'll be playing plenty of homegrown music by local bands. Hello, I hope you're all having a great week and putting on plenty of the Factor 50 in these wonderful sunny days that we're having at the moment. So to kick today's show off, we're going to hear from a chap who doesn't release stuff particularly frequently, but when he does, it's certainly worth the wait. It's Humble He, Bye Bye.
I heard a voice of reason and of rhyme, a simple choice. I heard the call echo down the corridor. Bye-bye. Oh, the winds of change are rolling through my mind. Bye-bye. This day was born from night. Too slow, too fast. It's only been a minute since an hour passed. Second guess, not a second more less. Bye-bye. Oh, the winds of change are rolling through my mind. Bye-bye. As day was born from night.
Humble He, Bye Bye. We're now going to hear from young John Jones, local musician who spent a good few years performing on cruise ships going around the world, came back home to near Colville, wrote some new stuff for the last couple of years. We've had him on the show actually, actually it was last year. If you want to hear that interview again, it's on musicinleicester.co.uk. But anyway, so while he was here, he released a few tracks. This is one of them, and he's now going back over onto the cruises to sail around the world performing his music. Lucky old chap. So here's John Jones and Pillow Forts.
Staying inside, I don't wanna go out. There's nothing for me outside these walls. I'm happy where I am with you.
Chardonnay and a PT whiskey. Don't need to hide the fact that we're feeling frisky. There's nowhere else I'd rather be today. So where do we go when the lights are low? And there's nowhere we need to be till tomorrow. Whether it rains, sunshine or snow, time is ours, time we don't need to borrow. Pillow forts in the morning, gin and tonic at dawn. Slippers and socks, what more do you want? Just us. Breakfast food in the afternoon, dancing round the kitchen to our favorite tune. And sunsets are the best when viewed from bed. I take a picture, take another 5. I promise you they're only for my eyes. I want to remember this night for the rest of my life. So where do we go when the lights are low? And there's nowhere we need to be till tomorrow. Whether it rains, sunshine or snow, time is ours, time we don't need to borrow. Pillow forts in the morning, gin and tonic at dawn. Slippers and socks, what more do you want? Just us. Just us. When the night falls, we can light sparklers in the garden. I'll try and write your name till it disappears into the dark. Don't be sad when it ends. Next week we can do it again. Those pillow forts are where our hearts belong. Where do we go when the lights are low? And there's nowhere we need to be till tomorrow. Whether it rains, sunshine or snow, time is ours, time we don't need to borrow. Pillow forts in the morning, gin and tonic at dawn. Slippers and socks, what more do you want? Just us.
That was the wonderful John Jones and Pillow Forts. Now it's time for this week's interview, where I'm chatting to Phil Stiles, frontman of local prog rockers Final Coil, and he's also embarking on his own project. In true prog rock fashion, the interview takes up longer than usual, pretty much the rest of the show, but I think it was a fascinating one. So here we go, and we're going to start off with Scattered Dust by Final Coil. That was Scattered Dust by Final Coil here on Live, Local and Loud. And I'm here with frontman Phil Stiles, who's also doing his own solo project. Hi, Phil. Thanks for joining me today. And how are you?
Hi, Kevin. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely fine. A little bit hot.
It is. It's nice to see the sun for a change, isn't it?
It is a little bit, yeah.
Or is it as a doom laden prog rock maestro? Do you like the sun, or would you rather be sort of in a darkened room somewhere and shutting it all out?
That's largely where you'll find me, and obviously having kind of long red hair as well does tend to mean that the sun is rather my enemy. But give me some Factor 50 and I'll head out into it.
Excellent, me too. Okay, Phil, thanks very much for joining us today. Now, we'll talk a little bit about Final Coil. You're the frontman of Final Coil. We'll talk a bit about that first, and then we'll talk more about your solo project towards the end of the interview. Final Coil. Now, they must have been around Leicester. Oh, I was looking back in my photographs. I've got photographs probably about 10 years of Final Coil. How long have you been around, would you say?
Well, this iteration of the band started in 2008, and I think we did our first kind of recording in about 2010, 2011. I think that was the date we released Live With Doubt,
Right.
which was our first EP. And then, we've been sort of steadily building things since then.
Yeah, because you really have. Have you played just Leicester, or do you play sort of nationally?
No, we play nationally. We've played as far afield as London. We played up in Durham way, and we're hoping to expand beyond that in the sort of next year once things start to open up a bit more.
Now, your bassist, you were telling me, she's Polish, so aren't you going to play in Poland at all?
Well, that's been a long-held ambition, and we obviously have done international projects. We haven't played live internationally, but both the Persistence and Memory album and the World We Left Behind for Others, the two albums we did, were recorded in a studio in Italy. So it's definitely something that's on the cards, sort of Brexit paperwork notwithstanding. But of course, it is a logistical nightmare, and with work and moving instruments and things, it becomes sort of a long-term planning project. But yeah, if we could play in Poland, that would be amazing, because the music scene there is phenomenal.
I presume Final Coil are still around, and your solo project will be going in parallel. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Final Coil was sort of really kind of playing some of the best gigs we'd ever played back in 2019. And obviously 2020 was the year that never was, as far as music was concerned. So in 2019 we played HRH Metal in Birmingham, which was a fantastic show. We played to a packed out room. We played Fusion Music Without Boundaries Festival, which was a great progressive rock festival. It was headlined by England, that sort of deeply unsung but very good progressive rock band, and Focus, of course, as well played. And we got a chance to play the whole of our second album, which is a sort of proggy concept album in the vein of the Wall, in its entirety. So that was cool. And then we went down to London. We played with the kind of legendary punk rock band Shonen Knife, who toured with Nirvana, amongst other bands. That really, really cool band. And we played the Camden Underworld with them.
Wow!
And off the back of that show, we got invited to open for Marky Ramone of the Ramones at the Garage in London about 2 weeks later. So we were really kind of taking great strides. And then, of course, the world kind of shut down on us. So we haven't been idle, and certainly Final Coil's not going anywhere. We do have an EP, which we recorded kind of during lockdown, of reinterpretations of old songs. So songs from, I think, the EP that we did, Close to the Light, as well as tracks from Persistence and Memory and The World We Left Behind for Others. So we've got that coming out at the end of this year. I don't want to give too much away about that, but it's going to come out through Wormhole Death again, our label based in Italy. And then we've also been working on the third album, which is a direct sequel to The World We Left Behind for Others, and basically kind of wraps up. It was always my intention that we do this kind of trilogy based around themes of kind of communication and sort of social breakdown. So Persistence and Memory was the opening part of that, and the World We Left Behind for Others, and we're just about to kind of wrap up this third record that's going to complete that trilogy. So yeah, we've got a whole load of stuff going on, and my solo project is something that exists alongside Final Coil.
So that's quite coincidental, really, isn't it? Because you've got all that that trilogy going at the same time. It sounds like it's pretty much lockdown matter, really, lockdown type subjects, and then lockdown happens as well. So it's quite ironic that lockdown happened when you were writing all that.
No, I don't know if it was a lockdown subject. I mean, the world we left behind for others was based on some letters I found when my grandmother passed away at the age of 101. Right. And she'd never really communicated her sort of past life, but it was clear that there had been a lot of difficulties between her and my grandfather, and they were that generation that lived through the war. And it sort of started me on this pathway of thinking, how the interactions of people in those generations, how the inhibitions, the fears, the worries, the trauma of war led to the kind of situation, the social situation that we have today. Including things like Brexit, has to be said. The kind of the fear of internationalization that seemed to be engendered by the propaganda of the war years, and those sorts of things. So I didn't want to be too didactic about it, so I sort of posed it as a series of kind of questions and kind of vignettes from across both my grandmother and my grandfather's life. Some of it was directly based in fact, so songs like Empty Handed are sort of stories that I heard firsthand. And then others were more kind of reconstructions, what I know from reading about history and what I kind of inferred from things that were said or not said by my grandparents. And so that whole album was, it was a very sort of personal sort of thing. But yeah, it was more kind of looking at how we arrived at the situation that we're kind of in now. And then the final part of the trilogy will look sort of more ahead at where we may or may not be going, with a particular focus on things like conspiracy theories. So, right. I try to keep things interesting, I suppose. But yeah, it's more focusing on that kind of side.
And I guess lockdown happened at quite a bad time then for Final Coil, just as you're peaking. Then we had lockdown. So after lockdown, have you got any big things lined up with Final Coil?
Nothing big is yet. I mean, we've been very tentative in how we've come back, because I'm sure you've seen as well, there are as many gigs being cancelled as there are gigs going ahead. And of course, again, with work and the logistics of putting on a show, we didn't want to start kind of making plans that then we're going to get cancelled at the last minute. So we did hold back a little bit. We were also in a difficult situation with regards to practice. Obviously, various band members have been ill or pinged. I actually got COVID and was kind of out of action for 3 weeks. So we were deliberately kind of pacing ourselves, and also we were busy recording these things, this EP particularly that's coming out. So we do have one show, which is local. It's in Leicester. It's at the Metal Monocle. On September the 17th, and we're bringing two fantastic bands. We're bringing the Medea Project, who sort of reside in Nottingham, but they actually their origins are South African. Very, very good band with kind of heavy, kind of atmospheric alternative sort of stroke doom vibes. And then we've got Igoder from London. I hope I've said that correctly, who are coming up to join us as well, and they deal in more sort of industrial kind of soundscapes, but we wanted to put on something really special, so we're bringing those two bands. We're gonna we're working with the Metal Monocle, who are just a fantastic pub. If you've not been there, it's one of Leicester's most interesting pubs, very kind of steampunk theme, one of the most, very, very friendly, and yeah, we're really looking forward to kind of taking over the venue for the evening on the 17th and putting on a very sort of special show. We'll be playing a mix of stuff, including, I think we've got one new song in the set list as well, just to keep things interesting.
Right, and yeah, that sounds brilliant. That does. I must admit, I love the Metal Monocle, and that steampunk thing, as you say, they've got going on there. It's really interesting, fantastic stuff, amazing atmosphere as well. Okay, Phil. So that's that, and that's going to be Final Coil's next gig. So let's play a song now from your solo project, A Slide into Depravity. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that song?
Well, one of my typically cheery numbers. I mean, the solo project was very much just something that kind of I wanted to do. It's more electronic. It's got a kind of trip hop vibe that's not dissimilar to things like Massive Attack, I guess. And the lyrical subject matter it's very similar, I guess, in vein to Final Coil. Very much looking at how the sort of the media skews people's opinions both to the left and to the right. So, you know, the sort of the opening lines about, you know, looking at the world through a media lens, kind of self-explanatory, really. But it's just a different way to explore these ideas, and also a way for me just to explore kind of different types of technology. I mean, the guitars are still there, but there's a lot more kind of electronic stuff in the production, and it was just it didn't quite fit Final Coil, which is much more kind of visceral and kind of rock based. So it just made more sense to do this as a solo thing, and yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I must admit, it did surprise me how your sound has changed. I expected your solo sound to be similar to Final Coil-ish, but it's completely different. But anyway, so let's play it now. Here's A Slide into Depravity by Phil Stiles. That was A Slide into Depravity by Phil Stiles, who I'm here with today on Live, Local and Loud. So Phil, that reminds me of Gary Newman in his industrial days, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. Is that a completely different style of music? How did that style come about? Why is it not Final Coil-ish?
I think when you've got a band like Final Coil, we're always evolving, and you will find that there's more kind of electronica kind of edging into some of the things that we do now, and certainly the EP that we've just finished is very, very close to what I do as solo stuff. But I suppose the main difference is that the Final Coil is always kind of created to be played by a live band. So no matter how kind of electronic we might get, the expectation is that there are ways to change it and bring it to the stage. And when I did the solo EP, I really hadn't ever intended that there would be a live kind of component attached to that. So it kind of frees you up, because once you're just operating in the studio, you can do a lot of things that are either difficult to do on stage, or you can add layers that you need kind of a lineup the size of Pink Floyd's latter day lineup to kind of accomplish. So I suppose that's why it's not Final Coil. It's just simply the idea that it wouldn't necessarily be sort of able to bring it to the stage. But the Gary Numan thing, I mean, that's a huge compliment. Gary Numan's absolutely fantastic, and the album that he's just released this year is continues in that kind of industrial vein. I think he's working with a guy called Aid Fenton. I think that's right. But they produce really, really interesting music. And I mean, it was Gary Numan that kind of started me sort of doing computery little recordings in the first place, because I was sort of fiddling about with that sort of stuff at university. And I remember that one of my friends, Ellen, gave me a copy of Gary Numan's Pure album. And I mean, I always liked Gary Numan's stuff, but I kind of remembered as the guy who did like Cars and Our Friends Electric. And I put Pure on, and there's just all these huge guitars. I was like, wow, this is a real evolution of his style, and it was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I mean, that definitely kind of sort of buried itself away in my subconscious, I guess. But, I have this discussion with a lot of my kind of musician friends, and the reality is that my musical tastes and the musical tastes of everyone in Final Coil as well are very, very eclectic. We've got everything in this house, from kind of jazz, we've got Miles Davis box sets, and we've got Dark Throne, and we've got everything in between. And that's not to say that we're not selective. We are. We tend to go for things that have kind of passion at their core. We don't like things that are too commercial, I guess. But if you only listen to Metallica, or if you only listen to Slayer, then of course the music you make is going to sound like Metallica or Slayer. But if you've got an eclectic kind of taste, inevitably different things are going to come out. But I guess Final Coil, it has its own sound, and I don't really want to deviate too far from that. So the solo project, became its own thing in that kind of way.
It's still, I suppose, your solo project is still pretty doomy and gloomy, isn't it? By the sounds of it, by the sounds of the
yes,
song.
it's. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with kind of socio-political themes, it's difficult to be anything else at the moment.
Yeah, good point. Now, you said you're in your solo project, you'd not considered the live element. Does that mean you're not going to be playing it live?
At the moment, I'm kind of reevaluating that position because obviously I've just done a full album, and I'd never really intended to do that. The Anchorite was just going to be something, that I wanted to do and put that out. And I was very lucky that a label was interested, and it came out through not Wormhole Death, through Epictronic, which is Wormhole Death's sister label. So I didn't really have any firm plans, but obviously when the world went into lockdown, I started, looking for things to do. I was still working, and I actually worked all the way through the lockdown. But nevertheless, I was still stuck in my house, and I had more time on my hands than I normally would. So I started to create a record, but I really missed the community aspect of playing with other people. So I started reaching out to musicians that I liked and respected, people that I'd worked with or played with over the last kind of 10 years. And to that end, the album, it's got contributions from the Medea Project. It's got contributions from a chap called Kyle Brandt, who's out in America. He sings with a band I absolutely love called A Light Within, and also his own project, Molotov. It's got Richard Alsop from Leicester's Monochopsis. Very, very talented, capable musician, great guy, great band. So it's really nice to get some of his skills on there. I've got Matt Steady. Again, Leicester chap who's just a remarkable exponent, kind of folk and interesting kind of sort of more rural music. I really, always loved his voice. He actually played with Final Coil. He was kind enough to open for us at a gig we did at Duffy's.
Right.
So, he was a natural choice. I've got Tomek Wulski from Poland, who I actually played in a band with back in the mid 2000s called Metanoia. So he added some bass, and it's really nice to play with him again. The Medea project that we're playing with on September 17th, they added added sort of elements. And so it was like this very community project. And I suppose it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that maybe there was potential to do something live with this after all. And I have started to sign up musicians. I do have someone who's willing to do guitar for it, and I've got someone who's willing to do bass for it. So we're looking for a drummer, which is always hard work. And yeah, maybe something will emerge from this. And of course, the album itself is coming out mid-September. Funnily enough, on the same date as we're doing the Final Coil gig, but right. That's not a hint. Sadly, we haven't got time to work up any of those songs to play live.
So talking about your EPs, so what's the anchor right and anchor hold? What's the thinking? There's obviously a theme going on there. What's the meaning and thinking behind that?
Well, an anchorite is a religious recluse who locks themselves away from the world to kind of focus on their sort of spiritual development. And some, I think many anchorites actually were even kind of declared dead at the point that they entered the anchor hold, and they became this kind of, they were still alive, but they were essentially a vessel communing with God. Right. And that idea, that kind of single-minded devotion and commitment, we live in a very strange age here in the UK particularly. We're quite a secular society, but that need to believe, that need for faith in something seems to have kind of gone off in all sorts of weird directions. And you've got people who are radically pro-Brexit and radically anti-Brexit. You've got people who are, really conspiracy theorists, and they've got these very, very strong beliefs that you can't steer them away from, no matter how hard you might try. Rationality and logic has gone out the window. And I sort of saw a parallel there, the anchorite, the sort of the recluse tapping away on a keyboard, focusing on their faith. And I thought it was an interesting parallel, and all the songs on that little EP were that. And then the anchor hold is more expansive, I guess. It's kind of rather than turned in on itself.
Are where anchorites live, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah, they locked themselves in, and usually there was only like one little window that looked out on the world. And again, I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of analog to what we're discussing here. If you think about, putting yourself in a situation where you're in your echo chamber, you've got this one little window out on the world, and you're not willing to entertain or engage with other people's ideas or perspectives. It's a similar kind of I guess analogy, if you like. So yeah, the anchor hold very much expands on the themes of the anchorite, and obviously it's filtered through the lens of lockdown. I didn't write all the lyrics. Kyle Brandt wrote his lyrics for Strychnine, which is the track I think you're playing for us today. Yeah. And that's actually better known as C21H22N2O2. I use the chemical formula because why not? And the Medea project wrote the lyrics to Reflections from an Echo Chamber, and I wrote the lyrics to the other tracks. But all of them were different kind of facets of being in lockdown, being under control, and the way that people kind of view that from their own particular viewpoints as kind of pushed by the media or pushed by whatever forces lead them into their own kind of belief patterns. And I suppose the one thing that I've been trying to push for with all of the music, whether it's Final Coil or my solo stuff, is I don't really want to take a didactic stance where I'm telling people, no, you're wrong, or you should be thinking about it this way. But I suppose I would like to see people adopt a more critical pose where they're willing to take on board ideas from other people and listen and be able to rationalize what the other person is saying in their own position. If I'm engaged with a discussion with someone and they tell me that they're willing to listen and reconsider their perspective based on what's been said, then that's fine. And at the end of it, we may still disagree. But if you take the position that, no, I disagree with you because that's not a position I recognize, I don't see how that's helpful. And I think that a lot of how we are in society at the moment is based on that kind of approach. So yeah, the anchorite and the anchor hold is very much a comment on that.
Okay, so Phil, we've spoken a little bit about it, so let's see what it sounds like. So C21H22N202. Tell us about that song, and then we'll play it.
So, I mean, very often I do think very carefully about my titles, but not always. And I had this idea that I would call this song Strychnine. I think it was in something I was reading at the time. That's usually where I get my ideas from. And it felt just a little bit too obvious to simply call it strychnine. So, of course, go onto Google, look up the chemical formula, whack that in, and there you go. You have a song title. And there's precedent for this. If you look at bands like Queensryche, they used to put, all sorts of kind of weird coded phrases into their lyrics and into their song titles. And I like that kind of slight air of ambiguity. And the thing is, if it makes you Google it or look it up, it adds to the kind of interactive nature of the music, rather than simply just looking at it and going, oh, that one's called I Love You, that one's called I Love You but she left me, and that one's called She Left Me and I'm Sad. It's nice to have something a bit more, that thought-provoking, I guess. But yeah, this was a song that I wrote. Initially it was an instrumental, kind of Nine Inch Nailsy, I guess. And I sent it to this guy in America, Kyle Brandt, very, very good singer, very, very good musician. And he heard something in it that, in all honesty, I never had. And he came back to me and he said, look, if you expand this bit a little bit, and if you change that a little bit, I can put a vocal on this. And I was like, fine, yeah, okay. So I expanded and made the changes he suggested. He put a vocal on it, which was frankly perfect. I didn't have to do any editing or comping on it at all. And when he sent it back to me, I sort of subtly remixed a few other things. I think I added some new guitars to kind of match the power that he brought to it. And that's it. And interestingly, he didn't ask me and I didn't tell him what he would write about, but the lyrical themes that he approaches is very much the same sort of process. And we talked about it later, and he's like, yeah, I was trying to channel the situation in America, what you might call the post-truth era, and how people are looking at things through a lens. So it's clear that we're of a mind, despite the fact that we hadn't discussed it beforehand. So it's really interesting that became the lyric and that became the central idea to the song, and it just felt very serendipitous that it would fall into place in that way.
Okay, so let's play it. So which title do you prefer it to be called? The complicated one or the easy one?
I think it's almost inevitable that people, once they know, will simply just call it strychnine, because why on earth would you go through the hassle of reading that out over and over again?
I see it as a challenge, to be honest. I quite like saying the difficult one. So that's what I'll say to introduce the song. So here's C21H22N202 by Phil Stiles. So that was C21H22N202, otherwise known as Strychnine, by the wonderful Phil Stiles, who I'm here with today. So Phil, yes, you've told us about that song. Now, your solo project, so your EP's coming out when, did you say?
Right, so the solo out, it's an album. The solo one is coming out on September the 17th, and that's coming out through Trepanation Records. Like great kind of independent record label, and they're putting it out on CD and cassette, which is cool because I really like the fact that kind of physical formats have been coming back, and Cassettes is a bit of an odd one. I never thought in my life I would be releasing a kind of professionally produced cassette, although we've actually done, I think we've done 2 cassettes with Final Coil now, and actually my last EP, The Anchorite, came out on cassette as well. But that's coming out through Trepanation Records, and you can find them on Facebook, or you can go to philstylesofficial.com, and all the links are there. There's some lyric videos there, and you've got the artwork and discography and links to reviews of the Anchorite and interviews that I've done. Wow. So quite a comprehensive kind of site. So yeah, that's going to be September the 17th is when that comes out.
Okay, so it's great that you're doing the cassette, and like you say, that's what bands are doing these days. But what about the vinyl? You're not doing a vinyl version?
There's not a vinyl version on the cards at the moment for 2 reasons. I mean, the first one is simply that vinyl is incredibly expensive to produce, particularly in short runs. But the second reason, which is actually more pertinent, is that you've probably read in the papers there's a massive backlog of vinyl pressing. There's very few plants actually doing vinyl pressing at the moment, and one of the mastering plants got burnt down. So sort of everybody from indie labels through to the major players are really struggling to get their vinyl pressed at the moment. And if you go on Amazon, you'll notice that even bands like Fear Factory, who are pretty huge in the metal world, they had to release the CD, and I think the vinyl was about a month later because it's just stuff is not getting done on time. So at the moment, we're keeping it fairly low key and practical. But again, I think if we were to do a vinyl, I think probably my sort of aims and my budget would go towards Final Coil, and particularly the World We Left Behind for Others, because I think that those records were very much made for vinyl. Certainly, to be fair, everything that I do is designed to be heard as a kind of as an album, as a piece. I tend to crossfade things together and try to create an atmosphere that works in a sustained way.
Your solo project, you're calling it Phil Stiles, are you?
For the time being, because like I say, I didn't have any kind of master plan for it. I was going to do the Anchorite. It was going to be a nice little thing that would come out and probably never do anything again. And then sort of it's kind of snowballed. And I mean, even doing the solo project itself was an accident, really. It was I was asked to write an outro piece for a band called The Way of Purity, and so I sort of constructed the music and I sent it over, assuming that it would be kind of remixed and mastered. And they said, no, this is absolutely fine. We'll put it on as is. And that kind of gave me this confidence that this sort of weird electronica that I was playing around with might have some merit. So yeah, it's all been very organic, but my feeling now is that there will be a live band, whether it will simply be called Phil Stiles or the Phil Stiles Project, or whether I'll give it some horrible, long, unpronounceable name remains to be seen. It could go any way.
Okay, that's brilliant. So obviously, you haven't got any live dates or anything set up. So hopefully you might get a band together and be playing live maybe next year, something like that.
I would think next year is good, because I don't want to take anything out that I'm not 100% behind and really comfortable that it's the best that I can possibly do. With Final Coil as well, obviously we're playing this date on September the 17th. All of the kind of rehearsals we've had have been just towards just doing this one day, because again, at the moment everything's been so up in the air. I mean, I had COVID, so I was knocked out for about 3 weeks, where I was locked in the house for 10 days and I couldn't do anything. So it's really kind of, we've had people getting pinged. I think Richard, the guitarist in the band, got pinged. Yoda, of course, is my wife, so she was isolated while I was. The drummer typically is drumming for 374 other bands. You've got all these kind of things that make it at the moment just that little bit harder than it was pre-COVID to kind of get things working. I know. So it's a bit of a slow build, but Final Coil, September the 17th, Metal Monocle. And that's going to be, we're really looking forward to that. And I think once we see this kind of COVID passport, vaccination passport sort of scheme come into place, and clubs are more confident that they can put on gigs and keep them going, that's the point that we're really going to start looking to kind of book and get ourselves back out on the live scene again. Because, I mean, for everybody, for every band, big and small, it's been really, really hard. And you can see now that there are bands touring and getting back out there. The Wild Hearts have just gone on tour, for example. But, it's sort of tentative, and you can see that the bands that are able to do that are the bands that do have, they've got that kind of really powerful kind of backing already, the live reputation, and the fans who are willing to kind of brave the situation as it is. And I think for us, it's been, and for most independent bands, trying to work your way around all of this. And of course, that weird situation where some of us are working from home and some of us are furloughed or whatever. It's been very, very challenging. And I won't say it's certainly been disappointing that we were kind of getting to that point where we were playing really good shows in London. And then,
all right then, Phil, so thanks very much for chatting to me today. How can people keep up with your developments?
Well, both Final Coil and my solo project, we've got Facebook pages, which are very easy to find, facebook.com/Final Coil, and facebook.com/Phil Stiles official. We've got Bandcamp pages, but I mean, the easiest place to go is finalcoil.com. Because that's got links to absolutely everything else, and it's the easiest one to remember. If your listeners are interested in anything we've discussed today, then www.finalcoil.com. You've got links to all the music, to all the videos. Obviously, you've got links to the Facebook page and Instagram and Twitter, and we're on all of those. We're very active on Instagram. We like to post, music that we're listening to and things that we're doing. Lots of behind the scenes photos from the studio and from recording sessions and stuff. So if you go to finalcoil.com, you'll get links to all those places.
That brings us to the end of another show. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, if you want to see what gigs are on in the local area and Leicester, check out musicinleicester.co.uk, and you'll be able to see our lovely gig diary, as well as you can hear previous shows of live, local and loud. I'll see you at 5 o'clock next Thursday here on Hermitage FM. Have a great week.